Welcome to In the Cool of the Day, and I'm your host, Reverend Dr. Sharon Anderson, and this is your segment from Behind the Podium, Conversations about Law and Faith. And we're back with Lady Darlene Hart for a discussion about her two tremendous books, Behind the Makeup, which was your first book as collaborator, and then the second book was Behind the Makeup of a Leading Lady.
Yes.
And we've had a wonderful discussion last week about your authorship, about your collaboration, and about your experiences, and the tremendous testimony that you have that has been a blessing certainly to me, but also to, I'm sure, anybody that's picked up this book and anybody that's listened to your testimony through our broadcast. So I wanted to follow up. There's so much in you, and there's so much that I think is just important for my listeners to hear about the 7 principles that you discuss in your book. So we have 7. The first one is finding your voice. The second is freeing yourself today. The third is breaking free and living on purpose. The fourth, find yourself through your flaws, which I like a lot. 5 is live without fear and forgive no matter what. And 6 is discover you're better and dismiss the bitter. And then 7, your 7th principle is acceptance. Talk a little bit about why you chose those 7 principles, and were they birthed out of your individual experience?
So the collaboration is 7 different women.
Okay.
And each woman had an issue, an area that they were dealing with. So mine was finding your voice.
Okay.
And it dealt with me finding the courage to speak up, but not necessarily about what happened, because everybody wants to know what happened.
Sure.
But really finding my voice in the anger, the bitterness, finding out who I was at this age now, 40-something-year-old woman, trying to figure out who was Darlene after all of this, because I started out as somebody else.
Correct.
I had different hopes and dreams, and all of that got taken during life happening. And so everything that I had planned didn't happen, and I lost myself in there. And I also lost my courage to speak up. And so it wasn't really about speaking up and talking and telling everybody, because I was good at, if you made me mad, I was good at talking. But when it counted, not just talking to be heard, but talking when it counts. And really having something of value to add to the conversation. And so every person had an actual area that caused them to either lose themselves or to find a flaw and live in that flaw and not really be who God had called them to be. So some were molested. Some had gone through brutal relationships where they were physically abused. And so those things they hid when they got saved. They delivered and love the Lord now. And they couldn't help this woman sitting 2 seats down from them and tell them, I went through that too. I was physically, I could see the makeup. And I did that. So I know there's something else going on with you. And you're just not talking about it. And so each principle deals with a different area. And we really had no idea which area that anybody else was going to come up with until we all so we did weekly meetings. And as we talked, that's where we began to find out, you're dealing with that? And what was interesting was that we found out that the person who had been physically abused had also been molested. And so there was so many things that had woven us together, and we didn't take advantage of those opportunities to say we're more alike than we are different.
And it's so important for women to do that.
It is.
We're harder on ourselves, I think. Women tend to be harder on themselves, and then we tend to be harder on each other. And then not very trusting of each other. So if there's always that give and take about, well, if I tell you my business, if I tell you what I went through, if I tell you my life story, like you said, maybe you'll judge me, maybe you won't find me to be that great pastor that you think that I am, simply because of my past, but even my present. Because a lot of times what I found is we can tell about our past, but the present is where we hide. What I'm going through right now is, you won't want to discuss that because you're afraid of how people are going to judge you right now. We all, we can forgive you for your pre-salvation, mess ups and hookups, but the post-salvation problems is where it gets a little dicey and more difficult. So that's why this book is such a blessing. Amen. To me, because it really deals with that post-salvation in church, 40, 50 years old, still dealing with stuff. And that's what the reality is. Every day we deal with challenges that we have to overcome. And if we would just come together a little bit more, it would make it, I think, a lot easier for us. And so having a book like this for women to go to, and even having you come out and share and be transparent on national TV is awesome, because it really will, I believe, bless other women, and women just let you know that you're not alone.
Absolutely.
You're not alone. There are women out there that will encourage you and pray with you and help you get through those tough times. You just have to seek them out. And certainly, Lady Hart, you're one of those people, and I thank God for you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank God for you. So why the second book?
So it's sort of my chicken soup for the spirit, you know. There were more stories that had to be told. And I realized that I hadn't just been hurt. It didn't just start when I met my husband at 18 years old. It didn't just start there. It was things that had gone on during, after I met him, before I met him. And so we always look at the older ladies in the church, and you thinking they just so quiet and so sweet now, but we don't know what they were like when they were 20 and 15 and all of those things. And so it was very key for me that we found women who actually had ministry title, because what we think is that because we serve in church or because we are in ministry, that there is no problems. We know how to go to God in prayer, and we know how to release what's going on. And if you don't, then it's something wrong with you. We say we don't judge, but we do judge in that way. And we'll say, okay, it's something you're not doing. That's right. It's your fault. And so now we need to deal with whatever you're doing, and then it's sit down. You can't serve. You can't do this. And they almost make you feel like you are denied from God. That's right. Like now I have no access to the Lord because I made a mistake. That's right. And what I wanted people to know was that doesn't deny you from the promise. Oh my. You still have access to the King. Yes. And just because you have made a mistake does not keep you over here locked up in prison. That's right. It affords you an opportunity now to go to Him in clarity. Yes. Because now I know exactly what my problem is. And now I'm going to come to you, and this is what it says. It says, cast your cares upon the Lord because He cares for you. It doesn't say you did a messed up job. You made some mistakes. So you can't come to me anymore. No, that's when you go to Him. That's when you go. That's right. When you go. That's right. That's right. That's right. And that's so critical. And as I said, I think social media sometimes makes it worse, doesn't it? It does. Doesn't it? It makes it harder, because I was watching the news, and they talked about us being a narcissistic society, and how social media is not causing narcissism, but it exposes narcissism, because people want to put their best selves out there, and then judge people when somebody puts out maybe what's less than what they think is their best self or a best self. And so you have people falling into depression, and then not taking that risk to reach out, to say that I need help, to say that I'm struggling, because every day you see on social media just the good. So you're thinking, or you can be tricked into thinking that everybody is okay, when everybody we know in one way, shape, or form, even with the makeup, even with a nice car, is struggling. And so I think social media, in a sense, and this is a little, off the path, but it just struck me that social media sometimes now in our society at this time makes it a little harder for us, because all we see is the positive. And we don't see people oftentimes reaching out for the negative. Yeah, I think that can be true, but I guess that knowing why the Lord exposed me in the way that He did, because the Bible says that He will pull your very skirt above your head and show your nakedness. Yes. And so that was as naked as I could get, that I had a problem. And so I think that affords me an opportunity to dig. Yes. Oh, now I know there's something going on. Okay, there's something going on. Because it's just a little too perfect. Yes. And we always talk about the person, and I have been guilty of that too, because I watch what I put in my spirit. Sure.
Yes.
That can contaminate you.
Absolutely.
So it bothers me when I see someone at one point praising the Lord and he's beautiful and he's wonderful, and then the next minute they say on social media, they want to fight, they cussing, they're doing everything that they want to do, and so now it sends me this bipolar message.
Sure, absolutely.
And so for me, it's saying, listen, watch what you put out. No, you don't have to be perfect, but you can say your husband got on your nerves in a different way, other than putting all of your business out there, because everybody does not have a helpful word for you.
That's right. True
they can send you in a downward spiral.
That's right.
So if your husband is a mess and you share it on social media, now you have just allowed everybody else access to your house. And now I can put in you what I want to put in you. And if I don't have good intentions, if my marriage is also a mess, now we're just talking messy people talking amongst each other, and I'm filling you with nothing good.
That's right.
I'm just overloading you now with more bitter, more hate, more anger. Absolutely. And we use people as a dumping ground.
We do.
And so instead of doing that, I don't like to show the perfectness of social media, myself as perfect on social media. There's been days where I've had a bad day. And so, I may not say pray for me because I don't give everybody access to my home.
Yes, that makes sense.
But I will phrase it in such a way that people understand that this is our time to pray.
Yes, or you give an encouraging word, because the Bible also says encourage yourself. So your post is encouraging, but while you're encouraging someone else in the post, it helps you. Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So one thing that just struck me is how did you choose these women? Because you, like you said, I mean, you could choose someone to share your testimony with and then get poured into in a way that damages, in a way that redefines, in a way that destroys. And so selecting the women for this collaboration, I'm sure, was important. But what would you say to women who are out there that may be saying, well, that's great, she found some sisters that will help her, and she found a counselor that would work with her on those issues, but how do I start? Where do I go? How do I know who to take that risk with? Because that's also, I know, a challenge for women just in general.
I think for me it was really because there's a couple of women in the book that really had, one of them dealt with a lot of sexual promiscuity. Okay. And so I really had to seek God on those. But I chose 10 people for the first book, and 3 of them dropped out. Okay. And so I believe God wanted those stories to be shared. Gotcha. Because it was things that, and while their story was good, I still believe that there were things that God really wanted us to focus on, that there were really messes out here that we don't address in church.
That we don't address.
We don't want to talk about it. No. And it's happening out here in the real world, and we wonder why our children find it. They find that
Say
stuff.
that again. Say that again.
They gravitate to the mess of the world because they want to have fun. They want to experience. And so I always tell my children the same thing. I lived my life. I don't want you to go out here and live the same path I did, make the same choices. But I do want you to be wise, and I want you to experience life. Because the last thing is we want, anybody to leave this world with regret.
That's right. That's right.
And so while I live my life, I don't shelter them. Now, they would say I do shelter them.
I'm sure they do. I'm sure they do. I'm sure they
I love them so much.
I'm sure they do.
But I try not to smother them
I understand.
to the point that they don't have. There's certain things I just don't let them do.
Right.
Social media is one.
Right.
But I believe
managing
that.
Managing it.
Right. They have to be prepared.
Yes.
And the only person who'll know when they're prepared or ready to go to those is their parents.
That's right.
But if you don't show them anything, they don't get to see anything.
They're going to break out.
They'll find it.
They're going to break out.
They'll find it.
And one thing I do know with our children is when your child has a call on their life, God gave us our children, but they're God's children as well. I mean, primarily. They belong to God. We're just raising them.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes God has a path that we know nothing about. And when your children say they're called of God, and they know from a very young age that they're called to reach places that maybe other people don't reach, they go through some things. And to stand by as a parent, to watch that happen, knowing, just like in your situation, that all things work together for the good, knowing what God has said to you about the destiny on your child's life, and watch all of the the mess going on around them, knowing that God, just like, you know, he picked Joseph out of that pit, that God is going to pick your child out of that pit is a very difficult process. But, you know, having women like you to share with and say, you know, I understand what you're going through, maybe not that particular situation, but it's okay, and it's not your fault, and it's going to be all right, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to grieve. It's so important in these situations.
Because we believe that we're not allowed to do certain things.
That's right.
Especially if you look at the presidential race last year, when Hillary Clinton was first running.
Yes.
They were talking about her at a point where she was going through something and she could have cried.
Right.
And they said something about her crying would be too emotional or too sensitive, and she shouldn't be able to show that. And I thought, how devastating could that be to somebody who wants to cry, having to say, and stiffen up and tight. And we do that to children when they're going through something. We'll say, stop that, don't cry, pull it together, and we'll sit them up. And now they are not allowed to be emotional and drain themselves of what is trying to bury them.
That's right. Right,
so
and
we hurt people.
And the Bible says that they that sow in tears reap in joy.
And what better way than let me cry all day and night?
Yes, and plant all those little
seeds.
Indeed.
Indeed, because I want to reap a harvest
absolutely
of joy.
Yes,
and if it's nothing else, I mean, you can have a pile of money and be miserable. But if you have no money and you're happy and you have no problems and you just feel good about yourself and everybody around you, but you got about $2 in the bank, you'll be all right.
That's right, because joy is not based on happenings. Happiness is based on happenings.
Absolutely.
And you can have joy in the midst of a tumultuous situation, like your situation, like situations that I'm sure you're going through, listeners. But you can have joy in that. But don't be afraid to reach out for help. Don't be afraid to find that woman or that counselor that can help you get through that situation. And don't be afraid to cry. I was on the podium at a funeral about 2 weeks ago at a homegoing service, and I was telling the family, because the mother had died unexpectedly, don't be afraid to cry. Don't be afraid to grieve, because if you don't grieve, that's when the physical illnesses come in, and that's when you get to a point where you snap. My father died about, wow, it's going on 4 years now, and I was daddy's girl. And I remember being at a chair like this in my room, and for a good 3 weeks, I would go to work, come home, fix dinner for my sons, go upstairs, and sit in that chair. And one day, I felt these arms around me, and the Lord said, that is the grip of grief, get up. And I literally felt this grip. And then, you know, just my whole countenance and depression. And I was really just kind of walking around in the cloud. I was just getting up, going to work, going to coming home, fixing dinner for my boys, and sitting in that chair, and then getting into bed, go to sleep. And it was just a cycle. And I felt that grip, and the Lord said, get up. And I got up and I cried, and I talked to a couple people about the fact this is my father, and he died unexpectedly, and I wanted to be there, and I went to court. You know, and I was supposed to, if I had gotten on the road, I might have seen him. And if I got there, then maybe I could have laid hands on him and maybe he would have died. I was going through all of that, blaming myself. You know, maybe I didn't pray enough. And it really took me to, like you said, to release those feelings, to be able to get to move on, because I could have gotten into a deep depression. So again, letting it go is so important, and that's what these books are about.
Teaching
and these
you the
collaborations,
tools just to let go. And it's just real life stories that people had to go through, that they experienced, it, much like everybody else went through. And we just took it as an opportunity to say, I went through that. God loved me enough to bring me out of it. I'm not denied from anything else that I want to do in life. And as long as I get up and I let go of whatever happened, and move forward, that God can still do something with this life.
That's right. Yes.
The glass is either half full or half empty.
It's how you look at it. It's perspective. That's right. And at 40, like, as you said, 47, you know, this happened at 47. It wasn't something that happened at 25, so it's never too late.
Never too late.
It's never too late. And because God says in his word that all things work together, don't forget that, because that trial that you feel is the last straw, the most devastating thing, something that you could never handle, might be the thing that catapults you to your destiny. Amen?
Absolutely.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen. So because we talk about law and faith, I did want you to touch a little bit on how you felt the legal system dealt with you in this situation, because we know that as women, again, there is discrimination in all areas. And while we'd like to say we've overcome that, we're still in a battle. So what did you experience in the legal system?
Well, for me, I realized that we didn't have as much help as we thought. That the system really was not set up to help a woman in a crisis. Right. So while I was the person who was convicted, well, I wasn't convicted, I'm sorry. Yes. While I was the person that was in handcuffs, yes, and that had been accused of being the initiator in this situation, I wasn't. And so my voice wasn't, he could say whatever he wanted to, and because he had physical marks, then they could say, yes, she was the aggressor, right? But knowing how the stature, the man, the record, everything, you could probably put 2 and 2 together. Sure. But what they wanted then was just to arrest somebody. Wow. So if we can't arrest one or both, right, then we're going to choose somebody got to go. Wow. So once I got in that system, what I realized was there was a lot of women who have been in domestic violence situations and they snapped. Right. Right. They've reported it, maybe once or twice, but because they had gone back, they were now the person that was looked at in the wrong. Wow. Because you go back, you settle for it because you maybe don't have the money. You can't afford an attorney. You can't afford to move your family somewhere else. And maybe you do have a lot of women stay in situations because they do have a nice, comfortable home to live in. They do have a lot of things that they don't want to go back to living in an apartment or living in a less than nice neighborhood. Sure. So they would rather stay here, and why can't you just help me to get him out of here? Yes. And so it's like what I realize is even though you're married and you own property, that's their house as well as your house, and legally they can't just make you leave. That's right. It was just so many different things that was set up to keep me in this situation, to keep me hurt. Now I wasn't, being physically abused. We had a blow up, just of things that happened, and that one night, it like came out. It was an explosion, and so undealt with issues often create an explosion. So it's dealing with them. But when you don't, and you end up in a situation like I was, there was really no outlet. There was no help for legally in the legal system for me to say I'm defending myself. Yes. And defense should be my right. Yes. I remember my children going through bullying in school, and they said if they say one word back, if they fight back, then it wasn't considered bullying. Right. So you literally have to stand there and, take it. And be beaten. Wow. In order for them to say you're not being abused. Wow. You're abused if you are beaten up. Right. You take it. Right. I don't know too many people that want to just want to just be beaten. Sure, exactly. And so that for me was a lot when they said you were not being physically abused and you really weren't defending yourself. Wow. It was just the way that they perceived it. And it had to be their decision. Right. And so once I got in that situation, even the prosecutor, who was a woman, an African-American woman, wanted the win. So she wanted the win. It didn't matter. Who you were and your experience didn't matter. It did not matter. There was nobody, even in the public defender's office, you really are forced to go and pay every dime you have to get a real attorney. Yes. If you get a public defender that sees no value in this case. Right. This is, for me, I could have said, couldn't you look at this as an opportunity to bring light to a difficult situation that husbands and wives get in? Absolutely. Or there are physically abused women out here that are killed because they lay down and take it so long. Absolutely. Until that man beats them to death. Absolutely. What do you do as a prosecutor that you're doing to stop? Because you see this. That's right. What is your policy decision? Yes. Because the law of self-defense says that it's about the reasonableness of your fear. So they're making a decision about the reasonableness of your fear, and you're standing there saying, I was afraid. He's 200 pounds, he's 6'2", and he might not have had a weapon, but I was afraid. Right. And because you beat him to the punch, so to speak, then you're now finding yourself accused of a crime because they couldn't appreciate the reasonableness of your fear.
fear.
Absolutely.
And that happens to women so often.
All the time, all the time.
Yeah.
And you know that most women are not going to, because there are, times have really changed.
Yes, 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 yes.
There are, Betty Crocker is almost
she's dead, right?
She's almost not around in the kitchen anymore.
Yes, yes.
And while I appreciate all of the hard-working women out here, we don't do enough to come together to fight against these kinds of things.
Yes, absolutely.
Because her in a position of power, of authority, she could look and see my situation and say, this needs to change.
Yes. But instead, she chose to take
because I got to get the win.
Right, I got to get the win. Wow. So, our prayer is that even through listening to this broadcast, that policymakers would understand that when they have a victim, it's real. They're real people. They're just not a number. It shouldn't be treated as a number.
Yes.
And thank God that you had the Holy Ghost and you had a relationship with God where you could come out of it because of that relationship. And there's so many people that don't have that opportunity.
Absolutely.
So before we end, there are two things I want you to talk about. We have just a minute. One is your conference. So these two collaborations have now produced a conference. So can you tell the listeners the date and the location and just very briefly about the conference?
Absolutely. We're going to Kieseltown, Virginia.
Okay.
And we're going to Overlook Campgrounds.
Okay.
And we're going to have a 2-day intensive where we're going to actually work through some of those issues. And it's a small conference center. We're taking only about 50 women up. There's no internet. There's no television. You can barely get clear signals on your cell phones. It is really a place where we're going to be shut away, and it's a beautiful place. Campus is absolutely beautiful, but there's no beautiful amenities in this hotel.
So just very basic.
Very basic. And we're going to be locked away for 2 days where we're going to touch on every aspect of the woman, from motherhood to her finances to business. And we're going to share. We're going to laugh. We're going to talk. And we're going to create a safe environment where we can just say, it's me. I'm having some issues that I've had since I was 5 or 6, and we're going to deal with those things. And it's June 9th through the 11th, 2016, and we're going to go away to the mountains, and we're going to have a good time.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you.
God bless you. God bless you.
Thank
it was
you so
a pleasure.
much.
From behind the podium, God bless you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.